Okay, today I'm going to show you how to measure or spec a sweater. This also works for a pullover. So I have a cardigan that I own out here. I actually purchased this from Target. To set up, I want to button the cardigan. I want to lay the garment as flat as possible, folding it about at the side seams, laying the shoulders flat, positioning the arms nice and flat. I've just kind of folded them in so you can see the whole cardigan in the frame, but I am going to be moving it around to take measurements. So the tools that I have are my soft tape measure, a T-square. Optional tools are a sewing gauge for smaller measurements, and then I prefer to print out my spec sheet and pencil all the measurements in and then transfer it to the computer. That's just my way of working. So let's get started. Our first measurement is the neck drop. And when we take the measurements for a sweater or a pullover, we are not going to include what's kind of called this collar band. Sometimes it's a separate piece sewn on. In this instance, it's a separate piece knitted or a separate stitch for knitted on. Here's another garment I kind of pulled out. And you can see that this is sewn on. So we're not going to include that collar band. So my high point shoulder is where the shoulder meets that collar band or that neck band. And I use the T-square to position it on the high point shoulder left and right to give me a straight edge so that I can then measure down. Back drop, not including this neck band or collar band, is 1 1/4. Down to center front, not including the neck band or the collar band, is 4. I would write that in. My neck width is going to be high point shoulder to high point shoulder. I'm at about 8. Neck circumference, let me reference the book on that one. I am going to take the measurement of where the collar band meets the sweater. So again, I'm pivoting my tape measure. I'm holding it kind of with my fingernail and with my right hand pulling it, right? Because my tape measure is straight, but this neck band is round. And I just kind of pull it in 1/2 to 1 inch increments. And I'm up to 12 3/4 in the front. And I would take the back as well. So I'd hold that at that high point shoulder. Again, pivoting that tape measure along where the neck band meets. Okay, I'm at about 9 3/8. Now, if you can't see your back neck band, you may have to flip your garment over. Relaxed and extended has more to do with if you have like a turtleneck, you would, or a fold down or like a cow neck. There's images in the textbook on page 107 to clarify that. For this garment, I'm going to skip those. This says collar height. So that's where I'm going to take the measurement of this neck band. I can even use my sewing gauge, and I'm going to take it at the back because it's easier for me to see. It's at about 3/4. So collar height, center front and center back. For mine, it is the same. Neck opening at top of trim. Again, I'll bring the book out to show you. Here's a little diagram that's showing, in this instance, it looks like it's a turtleneck. It's folded down. So we would open it up to take it extended, fold it down to take the measurement relaxed, and then there's that opening measurement. So it's different than the neck opening from HPS to HPS. It's the collar band to collar band. So in this instance, we could measure from edge to edge, and I get 7. Okay, so that would be my neck opening at top of trim. Okay, let me pull this down just a bit. Shoulder length. Okay, I want to make sure this shoulder is laying nice and flat. Pat it out a little bit. It's a little puckered from being on a hanger. Okay, from HPS, so where the collar meets the shoulder, down to that first seam, I've got 4 1/4. Across shoulder, that is from where the shoulder meets the armhole to the other side. I've got 15 5/8 right there. Shoulder slope from HPS. So this is where I'm going to position my straight edge again on the left and the right HPS. And I'm going to measure from that point down to where the shoulder, the shoulder seam meets the top of the arm, the sleeve. And that is 1 3/4. 9 is the length. Okay, so again, we have a couple lengths. I believe this is all on frame. Why don't I turn it sideways just to be safe? So I want the length of the garment. I'm gonna position my T-square or whatever straight edge I have on the left and right HPS, because the first length measurement is from that HPS. So I would place my tape measure at the top of that straight edge, measure all the way down to center front. I'm at 23 1/8. The next measurement of length is center front and center back. Now, let's see, we do not include that neckband. So 19 is my center front. And then I noticed, I'm actually gonna unbutton these, that my center back is slightly shorter. Okay, so you always want to check that. Or you could turn the garment upside down. Okay, but I am fine measuring it this way. So 21 1/4 from center back where the band meets the back. Side is going to be my side seam. So let's move this down. I'll lift that armhole, just kind of pat it flat. So right underneath, let's see, where is my side seam? I do have a side seam. So I'm gonna roll that forward and I'm gonna measure the exact side seam, 14 5/8. We're being very precise to the nearest eighth. All right, let's go back to, we are on number 10. Some of my numbers didn't print, so I'm gonna be guessing here. It says HPS to underarm. Our high point shoulder is up here, our underarm is over here. So let's use our straight edge. Again, position it at the HPS. I'm gonna pull my sleeve out a little bit so that my armhole where I need to measure is nice and flat. I'm gonna position my tape measure at the bottom of that straight edge, measuring down to the underarm is 8 1/2. Armhole circumference is number 11. I'm going to walk my tape measure. This is what this method is known as, walking my tape measure. Nope, I slipped, so I'm gonna start again. So I'm using my fingernail and it's holding my tape measure as I pivot. 8 1/2 for the front, and then I would need to do the back. Okay, so my armhole kind of comes out and then cuts over, and I'm just gonna continue to walk my tape measure to follow that seam. So I'm at 9 1/2 on the back. Okay, so I just folded it over. As long as this is flat and spread out, that's perfectly fine. If you want to flip the whole sweater or pullover over and work from the back, that's perfectly acceptable as well. Let's see, we don't have a raglan seam. A raglan seam is going to be this seam that comes from the armhole and extends into the neck. A traditional armhole curves and it stops at the top of the shoulder. A raglan seam goes all the way to the neck. So mine doesn't have one, but if yours does, there are some measurements for you to follow. You need to take that raglan measurement. Across the chest, this is, I always double check this one, 13 1 inch below the armhole. Okay, so I'm gonna push my sleeves out of the way, kind of pat my armholes down. I can measure 1 inch down and sort of eyeball it. I could measure 1 inch down and put a piece of tape on both sides. Now, doing this for 15 years, I tend to go a little too fast, so I'll try to show you all the tricks I used when I started. So now I know that's exactly 1 inch down. I can measure over from marking to marking, and I'm at 20 5/8. Take those off. Painter's tape or masking tape is great for this because it shouldn't affect your garment at all. Waist measurement from HPS. Let me double check that one. So I'm turning to page 111, and it's helping me with defining the measurements a little more specifically. Okay, measure down 17 inches from the high point shoulder line to locate the woman's waistline. Okay, so I already have my straight edge set up for my HPS, so I will measure down 17 inches. I'm going to mark that. In most instances, your spec sheet will say waist, and then it'll say something like, or you may have to write 17 inches from HPS, 8 inches from underarm. You know, you have to specify where specifically this measurement is being taken. Okay, so I'm 17 inches down. My waist is 21. Sweep is going to be the hem. I want to button these back up if you have buttons. Okay, and then let's see if we want to include the sweep. Okay, so we do want to include this ribbing, this extra ribbing down here. And what it is saying, 16A is relaxed, 16B is expanded. So mine doesn't, this would be, like, let me grab, actually, this might be a better example for that. Because it has a band that is pulling this pullover in a little bit, we would take the measurement relaxed, and then we would stretch it and take the measurement. So that's what it means by relaxed and expanded. Mine isn't pulling in the garment, so I'm just gonna take the measurement relaxed and skip extended. Body width at transfer point. Measure, okay, so this is where, transfer point is where the knit is changing into this ribbing. So it's basically asking me for the bandwidth. Okay, so, actually I take that back. Body width at width, sorry, we're doing width. Sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna measure at the transition point. So when the knit transfers into this ribbing, it wants that measurement, okay? So in this garment's instance, it wants the measurement at the seam. So if you're doing a sweatshirt or you have a band on it, it wants from here to here at the seam, okay? All right, sleeve length. Let's get our sleeve set up in the camera. Okay, so lots of moving, lots of padding, lots of getting things into place. Okay, so it wants overarm. Overarm is going to be overarm, underarm. So overarm is going to be from the where the armhole meets the shoulder, so the top of the shoulder, down to the hem. That is overarm. Underarm is going to be from the underarm to the hem of the sleeve. CB is center back. It wants the measurement from center back to the bottom of the sleeve. And HPS is going to be from the HPS to the bottom of the sleeve. Okay, there's sleeve length raglan. You would take similar measurements. We don't have a raglan, so I'm going to skip those. So if you have a raglan, you would have skipped what I just did and measured the raglan. The next is upper sleeve width. So it's usually 1 inch below the bicep. I'm going to measure that 1 inch below the bicep and then take that measurement directly across. I'm at 6 1/4. The elbow is usually, what do I want to say, 13 inches below. Let me measure across the midpoint of the sleeve. So this one says midpoint of the sleeve. So in this, I don't know that I agree with that, because if you have a 3/4 sleeve, halfway up is not going to be the elbow, but we'll go with it. Okay, so I'm at 9. Okay, and then I'll take that measurement. I'm at 4 3/4. And then cuff opening is going to be right here. Relaxed and extended. If this was sheared or had elastic, we would take the measurement relaxed and then we would expand it. We would lay our tape measure down and expand it to take that measurement. It also wants to know the cuff trim height. So the height of my ribbing is 2 1/2. I have no front pocket. I have no pockets. Button placement. So if you had pockets or plackets, you would measure those according to the textbook. My button placement, I'm going to measure the distance from center front to the first button, which is going to be 2 1/4. And then I'm going to measure from button to button. So center of the button to center of the button, which is 3 inches. And that should be all of your specifications for your sweater or your pullover.